everyone. Welcome to our award-winning podcast created by George S. Corey and the artist Cleo. We're back for Season 3, and so are Georgie and Gigi, for more fun adventures.
I'm George.
I'm Cleo.
I'm Steven.
I'm Maya.
And I'm Tavia. Welcome to The Social Contract. Here we are at the season finale. How did that happen? Last episode, we got to chat with the artist Cleo, and I'm thrilled that she'll be joining us again, along with the Social Contract podcast's co-creator, George S. Corey. What a creative duo. At the end of Kids Are Good, Part 1, we learned that Cleo knew President and Mrs. Carter. This episode, we'll get the scoop on when and how she got to know them. So, without further ado, here's Kids Are Good, Part 2.
The artist Cleo sat down at one of the kids' desks as they gathered around to hear her stories about President Jimmy Carter. "Were you guys friends?" Georgie asked. "I'd say we were friendly," Cleo replied. "I met Jimmy Carter many times when I was in high school and college. I first got to know him when I was a page working at the Georgia Capitol. He was the governor then. That was right before he became president." "Isn't a page like a knight's helper? Like a knight in King Arthur's court?" asked Georgie. The artist Cleo smiled and said, "A page is what they called a high school intern. Most of the time, pages were assembled in groups the size of this class, but I did get to sit with him in small groups as well. He made speeches in the state legislature in front of a lot of people, and all the pages would attend those too." The artist Cleo leaned in. "But you know what the best part was? It was when I delivered papers or files to someone on his staff, and he would be there." "Whoa!" exclaimed Gigi. "Would he talk to you?" "That's just it. Yes, he did. The governor would talk to us and engage us in conversation. He liked that I went to one of the best public high schools in Georgia. The Carters sent their daughter Amy to a public school in Georgia, too. And when they entered the White House, Amy went to public school in Washington, D.C. "That's so cool that the governor would talk to a kid," marveled Georgie. "I mean, you were a high school kid, but you weren't a grown-up or a lawyer or something like that." "Did he know your name?" asked Gigi. The artist Cleo looked around and said, with total amazement, like it had just happened, and said, "Yes." He would say, "Miss Cleo, tell me what you think this legislation means." You had to be on your toes when you went into his office because you never knew what he was going to ask you. He would tell us pages, "You are not mail carriers or messengers. You are here because you are the leaders of the future. When you bring me something, read it. Be able to summarize it. Talk to me like you're one of my advisors. Do that. Be prepared, and people will remember you." "Wow, he really treated you like grown-ups," Gigi remarked. "Yes, he did. He would ask us things like, 'How do you think this law will affect people across the state? Not just in big cities like Atlanta. Will folks who live in small towns or farmers in plains like my family be okay with it?'" G&G hung on to the artist Cleo's every word, amazed that a politician could be like Carter. That was a gift he had, she told them. He really liked people and wanted to know what they thought. One time, I delivered some new safety regulations that dealt with ships coming into Georgia's ports. He asked me what I thought. And we talked about how the rules would protect sailors, stevedores, and the public. It was a real discussion. Anybody who was around him would learn by example how he acted the way he talked. You know, Jimmy Carter would never say or ah or like when he was answering a question. He would just take a minute to think and then answer clearly and distinctly. Georgie asked, "Do you think he was born that way, or can we learn to do that too?" We all wondered the same thing. The state police that protected him when he was governor told us he learned it in the Navy. Us pages would test one another on answering questions the same way as Carter did. Even the smooth-talking ones from Savannah. The artist Cleo thought for a moment, then said, "One of the most important things I learned from him was that to be a good leader, you had to be a good listener." "Are you all listening, young people?" Sister Elaine interjected, only half joking. Another was that as the boss, he knew how to give orders because he had learned growing up and serving in the military how to take orders. Sister Elaine nodded and said, "That's a life lesson every one of us can work on. Even me, even Principal Sister Teresa." "Did you meet the First Lady too?" asked Gigi. "Yes, I met Rosalind Carter when she was the First Lady of Georgia. It was at a Welcome to the State House afternoon tea at the governor's mansion. Pretty fancy event for teenagers, and we were all on our best behavior." The artist Cleo giggled to herself, saying, "Mrs. Carter must have been in a hurry getting ready because she hadn't zipped herself up properly, and her skirt spun around with the zipper on her hip, not in the back. Of course she handled it with such grace. None of us said anything, but she must have seen us looking down at her skirt askew, and she just started laughing. Us girls helped her adjust herself and zip up properly." "What did the boys do?" asked Georgie. "Oh, they just held her cup of tea and plate of cookies. I've never forgotten how she handled that. I think of her laughing through the embarrassment. Do you know I relive that before every gallery event? I even thought of that story before coming here today, which is why I wore pants." Everyone laughed. Then Sister Elaine clapped to get their attention. "Cleo, tell us about when Jimmy Carter was your teacher." Well, after Jimmy Carter finished being president, he was a guest lecturer in political science at Emory University, both the Oxford College and Atlanta College campuses. I attended both of Emory's colleges, so I had President Carter as a teacher in both places. "Did he remember you from when he was governor?" asked Gigi. I had to introduce myself to him again, but yes, he remembered me. "Isn't it amazing about being president?" Sister Elaine pondered. "One day, you're the leader of the free world. Then, because of an election, you may have to return to your quiet life as a private citizen." Georgie raised his hand and said, "We learned from Sister Elaine that Jimmy Carter stood up for human rights." A big smile crossed the artist Cleo's face. "And that is one of the reasons why to this day he's still my favorite president. It took honor and goodness and great vision to tell the world that the policy of the United States would be built on a foundation of human rights. No one had ever really done that before. He even got an award for it. One of the most important awards you can get, the Nobel Peace Prize. And I was there for the celebration at the Carter Center. Honestly, it was one of the most special nights of my life." Sister Elaine, who had been scrolling through the Carter Center website at her desk, said, "Yes, I'm reading all about it now. The Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Jimmy Carter in 2002 for his decades of untiring effort to find peaceful solutions to international conflicts, to advance democracy and human rights, and to promote economic and social development. What a terrific accomplishment! Something to aspire to, kids." "I'm glad you read that, Sister Elaine, because it brings up what may have been President Carter's single biggest achievement, Cleo said. She went on to explain how Carter had negotiated a historic peace treaty between Israel and Egypt called the Camp David Accords. She told them it was a very big deal at the time because those countries had been at war for decades. Then she said, "One of the things I find most inspiring about Jimmy Carter is what he did after he left the White House. He continued to try to be of service however he could. And I think that's something we should all do." "Amen," declared Sister Elaine. The artist Cleo continued, "You've all probably heard about how dedicated Jimmy Carter was to Habitat for Humanity. You may have even seen him in pictures with a hammer and a hard hat wearing a Habitat for Humanity t-shirt." "I know about that," said Gigi. "They build houses for poor people." Sister Elaine corrected her. "They provide housing for underprivileged people." "That's right, Sister Elaine," said Cleo. "Jimmy Carter helped build and repair thousands of homes for people in need." "And don't forget the books," said Sister Elaine. "The many, many books." "Over 30. It's hard to keep up," replied Cleo with a chuckle. "I've read them all. And what's amazing is that he's written about everything. Well, just about everything. He's authored books about diplomacy, politics, religion, a novel about the Revolutionary War, a children's book. He even published his love poems to Rosalind. The kids tee-heed and made kissy-kissy sounds." Even Sister Elaine laughed. Then the artist Cleo projected her final word art slide. Against a blue and yellow background, hot pink letters spelled out, "Vote." "This one's very meaningful to me, especially today," she said quietly. "That's right," exclaimed Sister Elaine. "Does anybody know what today is?" "Election Day," the class cried out. "Voting is not only a right, but I consider it a great privilege," Cleo said. "One that we should never take for granted. Your vote is your voice. It's the most fundamental way for each and every one of us to participate in a nation that is by the people." "Are you going to vote, Cleo?" asked Georgie. "I already voted. I did early voting. When I'm old enough to vote, I'm going to vote in every single election," Gigi proclaimed. "And I plan on wearing my little I voted sticker at least until Christmas time." The artist Cleo received a standing ovation that day. Her heart was full, knowing that she had inspired the kids in her friend Sister Elaine's art class, just as President and Mrs. Carter had inspired her. That evening, at an election night viewing party, Cleo and the rest of the revelers watched on television as the returns rolled in. In a sea of red, white, and blue, as loud music thumped through the speakers, there was breaking news, and the winner of the 2024 presidential election was declared.
Wow. Talk about an election night knockout. What an ending was that. Cleo, that was really such a beautiful tribute to Jimmy and Rosalind Carter. And I think the entire audience really can feel your obvious affection for them. I'm coming away feeling a little bit like I knew them too. So I think that's something that you've offered all of us. Thank you.
Absolutely.
George, you handled that so beautifully as well. I think you struck the perfect balance between honoring Cleo's memories and these formative experiences she had, while also weaving a little Georgie and Gigi story into the narrative. So thank you, both of you, for this gift. The social contract really does feel like a gift. Now I want to check in with George and with Cleo for the last time this season, starting with my curiosity about Cleo, how hard it was for you to reminisce about the Carters as they were in their prime. Or When you look back at those people in their prime, was it just pure joy for you? Maybe a little mix of both? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was a different time for both of us, right? I was young and impressionable and having the experiences for the first time, meeting them and finding people who you could look up to, which honestly, that's really what we're talking about here, is that the values that you think you were brought up with, that you see them being illustrated day in and day out. The thing that always struck me was that Jimmy Carter, obviously, years later from when I originally met him, he took those values that he had and he put them on a world stage, that he was one of the first presidents who really put humanitarian issues front and center as opposed to a byproduct. And I think that that's the type of thing that I was expecting from him, from basically where he came from and what he had always expressed as being his values.
Yeah. Well, I want to tip my hat to you, both of you, for another amazing season of The Social Contract. I want to say congratulations on today's release of Baby T, the first in your new PC for Kiddos series. And congrats as well on the upcoming Kids Are digital and audio companion book. I think our listeners, our audience, will love it all. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a hint before we close about what's next in store for Georgie and Gigi? What new adventures you're planning for them and what new adventures you're planning for us? Or is that top secret?
No, it's not top secret at all. We love a good theme. With the younger set, we wanted them to really be educated in a fun way, There's lots of different things. And as for the people, this season, I believe, has to be about strong women, Most of the people we've talked about in the last two books have been about men, presidents, but
it'll be the women who save us.
They always do.
It'll save democracy.
They always do.
What a perfect note on which to bring our third season of The Social Contract to a close. I hope you all have had as much fun as we have. As always, we thank you, our loyal listeners and fantastic followers, for your support. We literally could not and would not do it without you. If you loved Season 3, keep an eye out for the Kids Are ebook and audiobook dropping on Cyber Monday, December 2nd. The collection will include all 3 of the story codas: Kids Are Brave, Parts 1 and 2, Kids Are Supreme, Parts 1 and 2, and Kids Are Good, Parts 1 and 2. Remember to look for Baby T, the first in the new PC for Kiddos digital series from George S. Corey and the artist Cleo, available as an ebook and audiobook. We welcome you to follow The Social Contract wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And check out our website at mytscpodcast.com. You can find George at georgescorey.com and the artist Cleo at theartistcleo.com. The Social Contract podcast is created by George S. Corey and Cleo, produced by Talkbox Productions and Listen, hosted by Tavia Gilbert. Associate producer Tatiana St. Fard. Mix and master by Brian Barney. Additional dialogue editing by Kathleen Conti. Production coordinator Brian Wilson. Social manager Suzette Burton. Until next time, on behalf of George, Cleo, Stephen, Maya, and me, Tavia, thank you for listening.